Commission meeting for tonight, Thursday, December 14th. Welcome everybody here, anybody that's listening to us online. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off. I'd entertain a motion to open up our Planning Commission meeting for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye or yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. First item of business that we have this evening is a public hearing. This is to receive and consider comments on the proposed amendments to South Ogden City Code, Title 11 concerning subdivisions in order to comply with new state requirements. We'll have to leave our Planning Commission meeting for a minute, but I'll entertain a motion to open up our public hearing.
I move that we leave the Planning Commission meeting and open a public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye or yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are in a public hearing. For anybody that is listening online or viewing online, you are welcome to make comments during the public hearing if you're not here in person. Please put public hearing comment before your comment and go ahead and post that. And so that being said, it is open to the public to hear comments regarding this South Ogden subdivision changes to comply with those state requirements. Anybody in the audience this evening like to come forward and make any public comments? Please state your name and city of residence and go ahead and make your comment.
All right, thank you. I am Christopher Pruis of 641 41st Street of South Ogden. And I love learning about new things that it looks like the government has us do as a city. And I did have one question as I've tried to study this a little bit. I was just curious, do they list what the fine is? And maybe this can be addressed or not, but if we as a city did not happen to adopt this concerning the ALUA, I was just wondering what kind of a fine or what things are imposed upon maybe not complying with that right away. And also doing my best to learn about it and listening to some of the comment. This is in Chapter 6, Section 3, on the utahlanduse.org subdivision review and approval. Anyways, it's listing some of the points there about the Administrative Land Use Authority. And I just thought it was a good idea. It mentioned in one of the points, it said that the Administrative Land Use Authority, which can be an individual, a panel of individuals, or the Planning Commission. And it said it can also be staff members, appointed citizens, but it cannot be the legislative body or a member of the legislative body. And I thought it would be a good idea, because as I've looked, it looks like almost some smaller cities, the Planning Commission and the ALUA are almost the same body. And I thought that is kind of a nice idea, because most of you are very informed, I feel like, with many of our city laws and codes and are very familiar with, and I thought this could be, in my opinion, a very good body to be able to act as both dual purposes. There was a notation that mentioned if the Planning Commission was this body, the ALUA, it does say that they would not be able to have the final review of a final plat for that subdivision. And so I guess my question would be, if they could not do the final review for that plat, who would take that place, or if that would be the city? And I'm guessing it would be a city who would do that final review. So in my thought process with this, or my opinion, I would be for having the Planning Commission be still or act in dual purposes, serve on the ALUA, because they are familiar with those codes already, and it also would then kind of still keep in place that double check process with not just placing all burdens on just staff members or vice versa, but it allows our governing body the opportunity to be able to still review that. It would also give opportunity for the public to have public comment, and then the staff could also do, then it sounds like, the final review of that plat. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Pruis, for your comments. I should probably backtrack a little bit. Mark, do you want to, just for those that are online and maybe listening, do you want to review what we're talking about? I opened up the public hearing and forgot to have you
yes. So, yes, if you bear with me, I'll kind of do a summary of what we were talking in the pre-meeting So this item, you want me to go straight into the SB 174?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay, so this is a new changes to our subdivision ordinance. It's in response to state legislation that's dictating that subdivision ordinances for applications for 1, 2-family dwellings and townhomes must be administrative. And then it's a series of specific changes related to that process of the stages, how many stages we can have, the timing of it. And the intent is to make the process more streamlined and quick, and the general intent, the overriding intent is to speed up the approval or denial process of applications for subdivisions because of the housing crisis that the state is in right now. So some of the details in addition to that, this process now must be administrative, is that, and that it only applies to those types of housing, although it can apply to others, was mentioned by the member of the public here this evening, that we must designate a ALUA, Administrative Land Use Authority, and it can be, in answer to the question, the ALUA can be different for the 2 different stages. It can be one group that includes members of the Planning Commission in the preliminary application, but that Planning Commissions and City Council members, City Councils members are not allowed to be involved in any of the stages, but Planning Commission members are not allowed to be involved in the final application. So in that case, to also answer the question, who would do it at the final stage, it could be staff, it could be a group such as we have in place here already, as we were talking about earlier, that we already have for reviewing applications. It could be another group, but in no case could it have members of those 2 bodies. So there would need to be some continuity between the 2, whoever did it, which in that case maybe staff would be involved at both levels. It's for communities that don't already have this in process. It has to be limited to 2 steps, which is the preliminary application and the final application. The preliminary has 15 business days to make those decisions, those reviews and decisions. If it is then forwarded, it meets all the requirements, and it is forwarded to the final subdivision application. There's 20 days, business days for review and for approval. During that 20 days, there could be up to 4 review cycles maximum, and at that stage, a decision would have to be made. There's a new appeal process, as you all know, that we have an appeal body that if the applicant doesn't agree with the decision, they have the right to appeal. But anything now that is dealing with public improvements or engineering standards, those will be heard by a panel of experts, of engineers, 1 engineer selected by the municipality, 1 by the applicant, and another on an agreed professional, also a licensed engineer, who will sort of be a neutral body in the process. For all other applications that aren't dealing with public improvements or engineering standards, it will go through the regular appeal process. And those costs, it dictates who's going to pay for it. Basically 50% by the city and 50% by the applicant. So that's a pretty good summary of what's contained in here. What the staff has done is has recommended that, first of all, that we utilize the staff review committee, which is already assembled, which consists of the city planner, the city engineer, fire marshal or fire official, building official, the city manager, and that that they be designated as the ALUA for both processes. That, as was pointed out, means that the Planning Commission would be informed at the end, but would not be involved in the process at all. It also means we're also recommending that no public hearing is held, because since these are administrative decisions, public hearings don't serve they can muddy the water, actually. But you can have one if you feel like that's not going to muddy the water. So, but we're recommending not to do that we don't have a public hearing. There could be just a public information meeting held at a Planning Commission meeting, for example. We could also officially make the staff, the ALUA, meet publicly and have it open for public attendance. Because
Who decides that? Now, you
we
said-
would recommend it to the city council if that was something that you felt strongly about, and the
It'd be
city
written into
council would,
ordinances to-
city council will make these decisions, since they're changes to the ordinance, they're legislative decisions that we're talking about this evening.
I was curious if they're not. I mean, we have I have maybe 8 or 9 cameras on me. And you're saying that perhaps the ALUC doesn't need to be conducting their business in the public.
Well, and that brings up a great point, because if you read in the Q&A, is one of the questions is, well, doesn't this bring up the Open Public Meetings Act? And if you don't have a public meeting and you don't provide an opportunity for the public to be engaged, then is that violating it? And the answers were written by one attorney, and his opinion was, yes, it could do that. So that's something that we maybe want to think about. If we don't have a process, we don't involve a public body, and there's not opportunity for it to be heard at a public meeting, then how is that going to be addressed? So that's one of the questions as well, is...
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
So it might be helpful to maybe look at this as you would if someone is applying for a building permit. If the plans go through review and they make all the changes they need in order to meet international building codes, which we have adopted as what we follow, then the building permit is given. It's approved, and they can get the building permit. Well, subdivisions are pretty much the same thing. If they meet all the requirements of what we have put in our subdivision ordinance, then the subdivision has to be approved. So would we allow public comment about someone getting a building permit? Well, we haven't, probably shouldn't. So that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and that is really the intent of this, by it becoming administrative, is to remove discretion, muddying the water. If the application meets the requirements, it must be approved.
No, the intent is awesome. I think and we've already moved towards that direction probably a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, where we allowed staff to try make some approvals of a lot of our work. Mostly that was brought to us with the idea that it was going to speed up the process. I mean, obviously, if it's going to be approved, or if it's something that's already allowed in our zone, why does it need to necessarily come to the planning
I think that's
commission?
where we were ahead of the game here, is that we went through that process, and we basically eliminated, I don't know what percentage, but most of our conditional uses.
Right. The problem I have with it is it's taking away some more sets of eye. I mean, it's been awesome, and I think we've probably agreed that it has sped up the process, but it's I had a problem from the beginning that there can be errors made, and it's like, oh, well, we'll just have to fix it later. And you go, what are you talking about, Steve? There's been several errors, beginning with this apartment complex, Woods Rose, right here, where things got approved because staff all approved it and everybody knew what they were doing. But then all of a sudden, after the fact, it has to come to the commission, and when things were actually, setbacks were not met and other things were done, and they says, well, we better adjust our ordinance so it'll work. And then we've got things, and that's just not right. And then recently we're hearing like the gardens. Well, that's really a little bit higher than maybe it should have been. But it's not like what we can do about it, because we didn't get the opportunity to talk about it. The staff just approved it as it went. And then other stuff that kind of bugs me. It's not 100% wrong, but, we've worked about signs forever. And Young's, Subaru, needed to make some sign adjustments, okay. But the staff did it themselves without coming to the planning commission, and they did a nice job. I mean, it was right. Everything was right to meet the sign ordinance or kind of adjust our sign ordinance to make it so Young's, Subaru could have their sign the way that their network of dealerships are already designed how their sign should be. But the point I'm saying, that really should have come to the planning commission. But staff just says, okay, well, we're just going to take the power and do this. So that's the gripe I have. It's like you start letting staff do stuff, which is fine, but not really fine. It takes away the public process and more eyes on something where no one really can maybe know what's going on. And if you have awesome staff, and which we do in our city, it's fine. But you could have a city maybe where there isn't awesome staff, and different kind of buildings could start getting built, and no one can say anything about it because it was just approved. And look at this. We don't have anyone here. Maybe Doug can tell me. Well, we have Christopher here. Awesome. But sometimes we don't have anyone here. How many people do we have online? You can't really see, or 4 or 5. See, I mean, that's just pathetic. We should have like 100 people in our city at least wanting to be participating in this process. And so I don't have the right answers, but I don't know that it's the best answer for me to just, I understand it speeds up the process, and I understand everyone's professional and can make decisions, and Lisa's absolutely right. My goodness, if it meets the ordinance and why does no one should say anything. It's just going to meet it. But I just gave a couple of examples where stuff was passed, and it really didn't meet the ordinance, but it still was passed.
Let's get into that a little bit more in the discussion and finish this public hearing, shall we?
Yes.
Let's do
Well,
that.
I understand. But anyway, you can see what's happened.
Great comments.
That's what I'm saying could happen.
All right, so Doug, we have 2 people online. Have we had any public comments yet? Okay, we've only had 1 from the public this evening. I think we'll leave public comments open till 6:40. At 6:36 right now. But I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing and open this up for discussion back in our regular planning commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor for closing the public hearing and reopening our planning commission meeting, say aye or yes.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are out of the public hearing. Again, please, if you're online, make your comments before 6:40, and I'll come back to Doug and have those read into the record. So, going back to Commissioner Pruis's comments, Mark, do you have any? I wouldn't say rebuttal. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's a rebuttal. We need one.
I'm concerned that, one, this is a state mandate. I don't always like the state telling the cities what they can and can't do, and I'm very public about that anyways, but in this case, the law is passed. It is what it is.
Could I answer, because I
Certainly,
think
go.
that question was brought up, what happens if we don't adopt it, right? And we're in violation of state law. And I'm not sure that this particular
Mark
thing.
goes to jail.
I don't think this one right now has any like fines or whatever right now. I tell you, part of companion legislation to this is with the moderate income housing. It used to be that they made it so we didn't have access to our road funds, street funds. Now they're even putting fines in it. That was adopted at the current legislation. So eventually it's going to get more and more onerous if people don't follow it, but we will be in violation of law February 2nd.
And what was the fine?
I don't know if there are any fines. I didn't see any listed in this legislation specifically. That may be yet to be determined. Maybe they're testing the water to see if everybody meets the requirements in the next year.
It just seemed like this was pushed on us real fast. If there's something that's been coming down the road, why is it like so fast that Lisa needed to put together a hearing herself? I mean, get it on the, I guess
I
you
mean, I think we
advertise it.
can all take a little bit of responsibility for that. I think we should have been aware when it was passed in May that we needed to do this, but I think nobody really started hearing about it until recently. And part of that was also that the state was providing funding potentially for developing these codes, and that was not made available until recently. And so everybody was, I think, holding to see if if the funding was going to come through and how it was going to be provided. But South Ogden has not received any of that funding, have not applied for it. It would have slowed it down even more. But yeah, I think you're right that we should have probably been more on it. We did talk about it maybe first time I heard about it was about 6 weeks ago.
So, yeah, I figured you're talking with other planners of cities that are
Actually,
more than
yeah, I was talking to-
5,000.
And I was talking to Matt about it as well. I think he became aware of it at probably about the same time.
So there are many cities that if this is their planning commission night, they're discussing this right now.
I don't know. I know some that have already done it. So I just think it just depends on if,
And we felt that it was better to have the public hearing now so that if you wanted to sit on it and talk about it for another month, you would have the opportunity to do that. I
Right.
guess we could have held off and had the public hearing next month as well, but
Oh, this got the ball rolling and should pique some people's interest. I would think that a lot of people in our community would want to talk about this. Because this is the last time they're going to be able to talk about it.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you. I don't disagree with what Commissioner Pruis is saying, but I've been at a number of public meetings where they've discussed subdivision plats, and it seems as though the public sometimes comes out when the subdivision plat is up for approval, and then they're really frustrated because it's on the agenda and they feel, the public generally feels like, well, I can come out and we can stop this at this point. And I think it puts the city staff and planning commissioners and city councils in a really hard spot to try to have, poor Mark explain to the public at large who's come with frustration with a subdivision, and understandably so often, but he's having to explain the difference between administrative decisions and legislative decisions, and often the public leaves very frustrated that the subdivision gets approved and that they feel like their time was wasted and they weren't heard. I like the changes. I like what staff has put together, because I think Lisa's analogy is really apt. It's we don't have a public hearing on every business that's coming in. They meet those things and it's an administrative decision, and I don't disagree with Commissioner Pruis at all. I don't like that the state has mandated this on municipalities. I think that the public involvement often leads to a lot of things being explored, not even necessarily in that subdivision itself, although often the ship has sailed for that subdivision, but it sure helps the community find where it wants to go with subdivisions. That being said, I think often people leave very frustrated and very disillusioned with local government through really no fault of the local government, through no fault of South Ogden or the staff. Yeah, I agree, Commissioner Pruis, people miss things, but I think that's a staff training issue. I think South Ogden City is a well-run city with really good people, and of course, yeah, everybody makes mistakes, but I don't think that that's a reason to not make this as streamlined as we can. There are two, just damaged city property. Mark, there were two things I noticed, and I had a question. The 10 days, is that required by the statute for the engineers? That seems like if they appeal, then we've given, the city's given itself 10 days to put together a panel. That seems like
that was my reading of it was.
okay,
that
that's
included.
required. That's, I mean, that's a quick turnaround if you're gonna get two engineers
is.
and they're gonna agree on a third. but if that's what the state's saying.
Everything's a quick turnaround.
Well, and I think that's kind of and I'll let you get your second point in just a second. But I think that's kind of part of the issue with the state, and I know when they were going through this, the process of making this, this code, or the state law, that it was really all about simplifying processes and making it faster for the residents or the people that are trying to subdivide and build or do whatever. And I think that's specifically why they put the timelines in there, the 15 days and the 20 days and the 10 days after the appeal and whatnot. I don't think it's feasible for a planning commission to meet every time. We know we can't have a public hearing on it, like that's already been decided by the state, but for the planning commission to be a part of even the initial review process, you wait another month, or call a special planning commission meeting, all we're doing is extending that time again.
Right.
And I think that defeats the purpose of the bill altogether. What was your second point?
Well, this one was more technical on the section regarding where which we eliminated preliminary plats. On sub 7,
What page number?
14 of the packet. It's right above construction drawings and where we've inserted the staff review committee is going to review these.
Lisa, can you?
What paragraph are you on?
It's the number 5, I believe, isn't it, in blue?
Yeah,
Staff review?
right above, yeah.
Staff review committee, is it?
So if you go up, there's 4, and then there's subsection 8, subsection 7.
Okay.
It's top of
yes.
page 14 in the packet.
Yes.
So that, sub 7 says, the standard forms approved by the planning commission for all subdivision plats. I think that might need to be changed by, approved by the city.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I
Just
mean-
like we eliminated planning commission certificate of approval.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know if you need to eliminate that, though, because if the forms, if the planning commission still wants a say in what's required, and Mark, you mentioned in our pre-brief meeting about the drawings and the list of things that we had to do that. Do we want that list or those forms coming through the planning commission? Is that still allowed by
I think
statute?
what they're saying is that those were approved by the planning commission at another time, right?
Well, I think that you can say those are the signature blocks on the actual plat. So I would say, I don't know.
I'll
You're
defer
right.
to you guys on that. That's fine.
yeah.
I just want to call it to your attention.
I mean, it no longer requires the planning chair's signature, is that what they're saying, right?
Correct.
But the planning commission can approve the forms and the mode of forms the
Yeah,
way that.
I think that it should stay as planning commission,
Yeah.
because that was approved by them for these standard forms
Yeah.
somewhere in the past.
Or if we
right?
wanted to
But
change
it's
them,
not
the planning
related
commission
to
would
the
change
actual
those forms.
application.
Yeah.
Okay.
What a good point.
Any further discussion from the commission?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Did you want-
No, I essentially agree it would not be a good idea to have a public hearing in this case, because we're just setting up the public to be
That's right.
disappointed.
And
It'll make it
I
worse.
agree. I absolutely agree.
But I do wonder if there isn't some way to connect public input to this process, even if it just means having one person from the planning commission sit in just on these subdivision applications, not on all the other stuff that the land use authority does.
So that brings up a question. I thought about this earlier was, and this is for Mark or Lisa, if the land use authority, the ALUA, is made up of staff, it says the planning commission shall not approve it, but could a planning commissioner be a part of that review board as a single individual, or
Yes.
maybe
I'm
even two
going to defer to
individuals?
Mark.
I believe it could, as I
I agree.
mentioned, for the only for the preliminary.
But even for the final,
But
No.
but they wouldn't be
He's not-
acting as a planning commission, they'd just be an advisory.
It says
Exactly.
specifically that they they cannot be a member or part
Okay.
of the final decision.
So in initial, and that may give some of the commissioners a little bit more confidence in the outcome of that. So in that first phase or whatever. So that's something we want to discuss. Do we want to have a planning commissioner on that ALUA board?
And
I
I'm
think
just
so.
foreseeing this as really the first meeting to say, you know, here's what I think the public's going to say about that. And
Right.
You probably already know, but it's optics also, so.
Right.
I like the idea. I think it's creative. I like it.
Mr. Border, did you have a question? I saw you reach for your mic.
Just add a couple comments. I think that's where I read the language on the planning commission where it said may not instead of shall not. So a little ambiguity in the terms there. Then just another couple more thoughts I had that I talked to you.
Oh, you mean for the final
Yeah,
application?
I
Oh.
believe that's where I read the may not, but I was trying to find it and I
Okay.
can't find it again now. But if the planning commission still wanted to be involved, just thinking creatively here, set the timeline on when we receive applications and still go as business as usual, like set a date, like the city only accepts applications on this date and then,
The 15th through the 30th, so that they're
yeah, so that
20
we,
days into the first or
we
something like
could
that.
still be
Is that,
involved.
can you even do that?
I don't think it would be a good thing to do. Can we do it? There's nothing that says we can't,
Okay.
but I would imagine that an attorney would say you shouldn't.
Right. This goes back to the shall not and will not.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right, that's true.
But we may, not.
Maybe the other question related to this, if we do include the planning commission on for subdivisions, do we do it for all? I mean, the rest of the committee is going to be, the rest of the group is going to be our city,
Staff,
our staff
review committee.
committee.
But
Does that
So you're
mean that
talking
they
about,
would
like,
be,
for site
the
plans and
planning
everything
commission
else?
just becomes a permanent member of that committee?
not the planning commission, a planning commission
planning
member.
commission.
Yeah, so it's a,
So it's a question, is it only for subdivisions that they do it, or they?
Well, and
become
that's not a
member
bad
of that
idea. I
group?
mean,
yes, because we would specify that the AULA is this, the staff review committee and a planning
Okay,
commission
and that would be only
member.
for subdivision applications?
Yes.
Okay.
Lisa, you had some other comments.
I just wanted to say that the new code does allow exceptions to be granted by the city manager. And I think that's what Mr. Pruis was referring to. And the reason that we report those to you is for that very reason, so that if you don't like the way staff is doing that, that you can take back that authority to grant exceptions if you want to. So just, again, you have the power to have that put on the agenda and discussed and a recommendation made to the council if you want that changed.
But that's separate from the item here. is
Yeah.
what happened.
Yes.
And I wasn't, I had a couple more just thoughts. I asked in the break too, like the development agreements aren't part of this, right? Mark told me that.
That's my understanding, is that development agreement still has to go through a subdivision application once the agreement has been approved, correct?
So the only development agreements are about development, not subdivisions.
Okay.
But
so
if a
they're not-
development agreement required a subdivision,
Then,
then you would exclude that from that portion.
yes.
But the development agreement would still be recommended by the planning commission to the city council anyways,
Correct.
or not recommended.
Separate from the subdivision approval.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just, we had that sidebar, so I think it was answered. And then I was curious, has the city council and the mayor, have they heard about this? And I was just curious, their thoughts on all this, if they have heard of it. And I guess what is our role versus their role? Are we just still making a recommendation? I was just
Yes.
curious about that.
So you're making a recommendation about the suggested amendments to the code here tonight. So if you want to make some changes before that recommendation goes forward, you're welcome to do that. You don't have to do that tonight. You can discuss it at the next meeting. And there will still be enough time for us to hit the deadline if we wanted to take that time.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other discussion from the commission?
Yeah, I just wondered when I know it's not even decided, but do we decide, or the staff will obviously decide when the ALUA would meet, committee would meet?
We would meet in response to when the application was received.
So is that something during a city hours?
So,
You would just break out a time and say, we're going to have this meeting? Or
So-
is it on a set day? Would it be on a set day at a certain time?
let me tell you how we have been doing development reviews by the staff review committee. We get the application, I get the application, I scan everything, or they submit all the plans to me digitally. And I send them out to the different members of the staff review committee, and I say, your review is due by this deadline. They get their reviews done, they send them to me, I send them all out to the applicant with all the red lines. And I'm picturing in my mind that that's the same way that the subdivision review would happen. In other words, we wouldn't meet all together. It's just that each one would do their review separately. The engineer would do all the
Right, I follow
engineering.
you.
Mark would check them to make sure the lots meet our development under which zone it is. So that's kind of how I pictured it working.
How would you tackle the comment that Mark had made earlier about those meetings being required to meet the Public Meetings Acts?
Well, that was one attorney's opinion,
Right.
and I don't know that,
Has our attorney weighed in on it?
no?
Just curious.
Yeah.
Well, I would
but if
think
this question about the city council specifically being kept out, I don't think that's an issue in South Ogden, because we've been very clear about designating legislative administrative decisions. Other communities, it's been a lot less concrete, and I've seen it in action, where the planning commission does what they're supposed to do, and then the city council demands that it comes to them for discussion afterwards. And it's getting rid of that this process is eliminating that
Sure.
from being allowed.
But I still think you potentially would end up with a lot of upset community members, because there might be a developer who buys some land and buys a lot of houses, and high-density housing or row houses would be permitted in that, permitted use in that area, and then they would just tear it down and put it in, and the citizens of that neighborhood would not realize what's happening until it's happening. And they couldn't do it. I understand it's all, it would all be approved anyway, and all allowed by ordinance. But I think people should have a little more heads up that that they might be living next to something that they don't want to live next to.
Yeah, probably the argument is that the public has the opportunity to be involved when the zoning decisions are made for that
Correct.
particular area, or that when the code is being made of what is allowed and what the requirements are. So again, when it does become an administrative action, should be fairly straightforward. There shouldn't be any, I'm not saying the public won't be surprised, because they're not all aware of what was brought up here by Mr. Mills, that the public doesn't understand the nuances. And so that, I think you're right, people might be upset, but it is following the rules that we have in place.
Also, if the staff gave a report to the planning commission, they could potentially hear about it then.
Which you can add that to this code if you'd like.
So, speaking of adding or whatever to the code, we kind of have three options here. We can either table this and move it down the road and talk about it more later, refine the code, make suggestions, whatever.
Well, who's taking the notes of what we should do? So if we do table this, we're not wasting time to just start it all over again. Like what we just discussed in this last 10 seconds was, maybe it would be really, I think it'd be really good for the for the planning commission to be aware what the ALUA.
Yeah, I agree,
came
and
up
that, and
with.
like I said, we could put that in the staff report. So so our options are, we can modify what is put before us by making those kind of changes. And then after that modification, send it up to the city council for approval. Again, this is an ordinance change, so they've got to make that final decision anyways. So we can make those modifications and send it to the city council. Number two is Mr. Vlasic put on our staff report. We can table it, or we can deny the updated subdivision ordinance and
Well, the only way I know we can modify it is if we're not ready to modify it tonight, we'll still be thinking about it. So next meeting, we're then really doing the real modification. So it's kind of like just tabling it, but we still need to have in mind.
you can
what
make
we're
that
doing.
motion.
I would suggest that if you're going to make the motion to table it, that you state in the motion what things you would like staff to put in it to bring back for next time.
And if you're going to do that, you might as well put it in to change the ordinance just to recommend it.
Yeah, we better
Either
start
way.
doing some talking then.
Just
Well, that's, I mean,
because, sorry, I just want to say, it kind of needs to be a consensus of everyone on the planning commission as to what changes are made. I mean, if only one person wants it, but 5 others don't, should staff put it in?
so if through our conversation, give me just 1 second, Commissioner. Through our conversation, we've talked about a staff report back to the planning commission, and we've talked about putting a planning commissioner on the ALUA
Board.
board. Are there any other modifications that you'd like to that?
Now that we've learned that they do asynchronous reviews on that, meaning through via email, what would prevent them from putting, or just emailing as a, hey, for your information, to all of the planning commissioners? Just a thought, not that we would all need to actively
Could we do that
participate.
without, obviously, they wouldn't have a deciding vote on that, they wouldn't have a review process, but you could inform them and include them in the emails on those that go out to the ALUA board, correct?
That's a question, I think we could, but I think I'd
Lisa-
want to check with an attorney.
Lisa, and another question is, would it happen at all review stages or just at the final?
Right.
Or the final of the preliminary and the
The
final
preliminary, yeah,
of the final? Because we have up to 4 sessions that we can review it, send it back, they make changes, they resubmit it, we review it. So
Does it
would we do
does
it at
happen
each
on
of those
one?
stages as we're trying to get it closer and closer, or would it just be at the final?
Well, since the planning commission may not participate,
In the final, right, that's right.
And I was thinking just in that preliminary phase, not the final, was just my thought.
I think you have a good point, especially on the final application. Planning commission should probably just be informed of the decision. Because, and that would happen at the end of the process after a
I
decision
don't
was made.
think the planning commission as a whole could give input, and I don't think we could have any say in the final decision. We could be informed, I guess, but
And maybe
if we
that,
give input at
Which
all,
could
then
happen at the following planning commission meeting.
if we get input at all, I think we are in the
Involved.
realm of an open and public meeting issue. But
I think if you include everybody, you're probably right.
so maybe we go back to the point where after it's been approved, we report it to the planning commission
In the following
in
meeting?
the following meeting.
I also would like, really, I think for the final meeting that the ALUE or committee does, that would be recorded and be like a public, be able to be viewed publicly.
That's opening up a can of worms, because then that same entity is also the one that's doing site plans and building plan reviews and that kind of stuff. So if they do it for one application, subdivisions, they'd probably be required to do it for, if you're telling them that the ALUA is bound by the Public Meetings Act, then, and again, that's only one attorney's opinion, then all of their meetings would have to be bound by that Public Meetings Act.
I wouldn't mind that, all their meetings.
Well, I'm
I'd
not
love to
disagreeing with
see
you, I'm just saying, it broadens that scope of what we need to look at.
That's-
I think their email conversation as they redline and are all subject to grandma anyways.
They are.
Anybody could request it. And
That was going to be my comment. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, commissioners, we've had a conversation about it. Anybody want to make a motion to,
I'll make a motion, I'll try. I move that we recommend approval to the city council that the updated subdivision ordinance with the findings and conditions and the conclusions of the staff report with 2 additions. That the staff review committee, the administrative land use authority, include a single planning commission member for each subdivision. So that could rotate or however, but a planning commission member be involved at that preliminary plat approval process in the way that other staff members are included. And that staff provide a written or verbal report on approved plats to the planning commission at the meeting following approval.
I have a motion with those changes. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. This will be a roll call vote. Commissioner Bradley,
yes,
Commissioner Pruis,
No, I'm still not excited about the whole part from the state and making us do all this. Sorry.
understood. Commissioner Mills,
Aye.
Commissioner Dredge,
yes.
Commissioner Berger.
Yes.
Having the requisite number of votes, that motion passes. Recommended the city council with the changes that the planning commissioner be included on ALUA board and that the staff inform planning commission at the next available meeting, either written or verbally. Ms. Kapatnoff, any questions on how that worked out?
I think I've got it.
Sweet. All right. Thank you, all of you, for your input, Mark especially. Yeah. Next item on our agenda is number 3, item B. This is discussion on whether to allow stacked or tandem parking. This is also in relation to our, kind of into our ADU ordinance that passed a city council last meeting. Mr. Vlasic, do you want to go over that again with us?
Yes, so the ADU ordinance was recently passed, and some of the applications that we've received during that period have had challenges of meeting the parking requirement, which is 1 additional parking space.
Mark, can I just clarify? So the ADU original ordinance was passed quite a while ago, 6 months ago, maybe? And we have had quite a few for internal, applications for internal ADUs. The attached and detached ADU
Is what just
ordinance
passed,
was just passed last
And
Tuesday.
we've had no applications.
We've had no applications.
Gotcha.
Right, so staff was one, because of that, I know that the ADU ordinance was passed with the intent of providing some housing options for the city and for the public, for people that want to live here. And we were concerned that the parking requirement, as we currently have it, that if there's any flexibility or other options that we could consider to help properties meet that requirement, particularly properties that are smaller and have challenges already. So this is more informative than anything that the staff has been researching. Do other communities, for example, allow parking to be tandem, as discussed here, that you have parking in the rear of a property, a driveway that leads to that parking, and would you formally allow one of that driveway to become a parking space when the other 2 parking are not being used or are being used? We looked at several different communities, and we could find no real support for doing that. It seems like, doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, because it requires potentially people from different families negotiating and saying, I need to get out of here, you need to move your car, you need to temporarily park it on the street, and then we might end up getting problems with street parking, for example. So as we went through this, we were thinking it was probably kind of one idea and we are now not necessarily thinking that this is such a great idea. I'm not anyway. But I guess the question is, are there other options that we might consider, or are we feeling really good that if they can't meet the parking requirement under current conditions, do we just say it's too bad, and that means that those houses will not be given any special consideration? And this discussion about tandem, as we looked at it, was only about for meeting ADU requirements, nothing else. And so it's just an idea of, and maybe we're jumping the gun here, we maybe need to let the process play out a little bit more. If we keep finding that this is a problem, other communities are eliminating their additional parking requirement.
Is there, the one question I had when I was reading through this was, can we differentiate this exception or this new rule would be just for ADU parking, or does that open up a can of worms for any single-family resident out there?
Well, that's a concern, and it might do that. I think that it would need to be, as laid out here, would be just for ADUs. As you're aware, we did change the parking and driveway requirements recently that could play into this as well. We looked at that code as well to see how that is affecting this. But it's just something that we, I think the city's going to be coming under pressure to start not just saying we put the legislation in place, but we need to see ADUs as being a real viable alternative for meeting moderate and other lower income housing that's missing out there.
Where does that pressure come from?
What pressure?
Well, you said the city's going to be coming under pressure. Is that something again from the
That's
state?
again from the state.
Yeah, that's getting me going again.
Yeah.
That it's from the state. It's not, our city can decide our own city. We don't need the
That's
state
right.
always
Well,
to
the
tell
state
us
is
about
already-
ADUs.
Yeah, the ADU legislation that we originally did for the internal was mandated by the state. And the new fines are also mandated by the state. They have modified it last year, modified it again, and tightening it up. I would imagine if we don't start to see a lot of communities that put a lot of their eggs, their ADU, not their moderate income housing eggs into the ADU basket. And if it's not playing out and actually providing reasonable housing alternatives, I'd imagine the state's going to keep ratcheting it. And so it's something that we need to
So we need to
think
vote
about.
different people in the state, right? I mean, that's what it would be. Someone there is in cahoots with somebody else that thinks that we need all
Because
this.
they're all
Because
developers.
not all, yeah, it might be. I don't know for sure, but anyway.
Well, it's just, anyway, so I think since we adopted it, which means that the city supports ADUs, if the parking is turning out to be something that's preventing it from happening, does the planning commission want to re-look at the parking requirement? We've looked at one idea here that doesn't seem to be moving forward. Are there other ideas such as, and this is not going to go over well, I don't think, that many communities allow their people to officially park on the streets?
Well, I think the only reason people aren't doing it is because they don't want to open their wallets, maybe. When they want to think that an ADU is some cheap alternative to having a rental income, and it's not. They're very expensive. It's more expensive than building a house.
Right.
So you got to do quite a bit of work to be able to put in a new driveway that goes all the way to your back of your property, because you can provide the parking for the ADU, but it's not for free. So I don't know why it would be the city's responsibility ever to have to say, well, we're going to now try to make our city look tacky just to be able to provide ADUs.
Well, cities do it because they want to provide the alternative housing, because they don't have it and they're suffering because they have workers that have no housing to move into.
We
And so
got
that
plenty,
is,
in our city, there's no way. None of our giant units that I know of when I go and talk to those people are full yet. Some of these on 40, it's not even close to full yet. So when we keep hearing, now, I understand, I'm not the person who's crunching those numbers. Someone's crunching the numbers that says we need so much housing, but those folks are begging for people to come and move here, making special incentives. to help lure people to come here, because they're
And
not
they have
like,
parking places for
it's
them.
not like filling up like they're so fast that we need more. But the long and short of it, when we first started ADUs a long time ago, it was because maybe there was an elderly family, this is internal ADUs, and they needed a little source of extra income. So they've got this big house, and it's just them in the house, and so well, why not just convert my basement into an ADU? I mean, that made a lot of sense. But folks that think that they're going to build an ADU in the back of their house, now with the new setback requirements, have to be 5 feet away from a property line. You can't turn an existing garage into one. You're going to build a new building. And it is by far way more expensive to build a building behind a house because you have to use small equipment to excavate the soil. You have to convey the concrete with a pump truck. It is just really expensive compared to building a new house. I don't see a lot of them ever getting built, and that's not for me to worry about, but I think if someone really wants to do that, then they're going to also have the money to be able to put in their driveway and run it to their backyard and provide the parking.
So I
Can I-
guess there's, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
So whether it's an internal ADU or an external detached ADU, the fact is that either one is going to need one more parking space. That's what the city has determined. Now, we can determine that no additional parking is needed, but that's what we have chosen to do. Whether that parking is back by a detached ADU, or if there's not a way to do that, if it's just to the side of the house, the parking has to be there, whether it's, again, an internal ADU or an detached. The point is, tandem parking is one way to meet that. So kind of what brought up this whole discussion was we received an application for an internal ADU, and the home was sited on a pretty steep road. So there wasn't, it was very difficult for him to put parking on the side of, either side of his house. However, he did have a carport. And the carport was very deep in that it could allow 2 compact cars, one behind the other. So he did have his 2 required parking spaces, off-street parking spaces, but he asked that we count one side of his carport as the additional parking space. And so that was kind of how this whole question came about. We couldn't allow it under the current code because tandem parking or stacked, they're both the same thing, isn't allowed. So it came, we just thought, well, is it something that the Planning Commission should consider? And we thought, yeah, they should talk about it and see if they want to allow it, maybe just for ADUs, or if they want to not allow it at all. So that's kind of how it came about. And I also wanted to point out that the form-based code does allow tandem parking, but it has to be approved by the city manager. It's again that he's the authority that allows exceptions or those types of
So could
things.
could the city manager, when they're doing this ADU, could staff end up approving that, because that's already in the code?
But that's only in the
Only the form-based code.
form-based code area,
Oh.
so most of these applications,
Gotcha,
their
are going to be
retrofits are
in,
going to
yeah,
be in.
our zones, and, yeah.
I don't want to be the guinea pig, I guess. I'd like to see some other municipalities try this and work the kinks out. I don't know that I'm vehemently opposed to the idea, but I don't want South Ogden to be necessarily the leading the charge on that. I don't feel like it's a big enough issue that we should take that on. And candidly, like, all of our ADU codes are still very new. I mean, 6 months for the,
Detached.
yeah, thank you. I think that, I don't think it's something that I would say I'd never consider personally, but I just think let's let it ride for a while. And I think there'll be a number of communities in Salt Lake County that will have to face these issues a lot sooner than we will, and let's let them use
I
all
could-
the blood, sweat, and tears that they need to.
I can speak to Salt Lake. They just passed legislation that all single-family residential zones now are required to allow duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, and I think it was higher housing as well, as long as it can physically fit in and meet all the zoning requirements. They
So-
basically eliminated single-family
So they
zones.
limited our ones.
Mhm.
that's-
They just, and this is something that whole cities have done. Minneapolis and Seattle have got rid of single-family zoning totally.
That would make our
It means
residents
that,
happy.
that just said that you can still have a single-family home, but you have to allow all these other things as well. And it's because they're just, they don't have enough housing.
But they have enough water. And we keep begging for people to come here, and we don't even have enough really of water, which we haven't heard the hype about it anymore so much since we had a good winter last year.
It'll come back.
But we are really low on water. I think it's going to be a big issue for all communities on the Wasatch Front anyway.
So this is kind of a discussion item.
I
and
think it is. I think it is, and started out to be something that maybe we had an idea here, and as we look deeper into it, it wasn't as easy as we thought it would be. That's my take on it.
I agree to let it ride for a little bit and see what comes.
I'm
of
okay
it,
with that.
so.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item before we, and again, Mark, if you're hearing things out there and need to bring it up again, throw it back on the agenda, for sure.
Will,
I won't be here.
One thought I had is just I know South Ogden isn't there yet, but any requirement that obligates parking spaces just further keeps us dependent on automobiles. Like if there was proximity to like a bus station or other transportation, like when I lived in Boston for a while, cars were more of a hindrance than a help. It was just easier to get around, but I know we're not anywhere near that with our public transit, but just a thought.
That's a great point, because the more we accommodate for parking, the less, I mean, I don't want to force anybody's hand on that, but the less we steer them towards either public transportation or walkable areas and that kind of stuff too. So it's something to consider for sure. Okay, let's be done with that part, and let's move on to the setback requirements. This, again, was something that was brought up in the city council meeting when the detached ADUs were approved last week, and we've got some more insight on that. Mr. Vlasic, you want to give us another rundown on
Yes,
this one?
so to summarize, when that legislation was passed, one of the issues with, and this is particular for detached ADUs located in the rear yard, that the requirements for side and rear yard setbacks were dictated as being the same as for an accessory building, which allows up to those buildings to be up to 1 foot from the property line. It was pointed out by a building official that to meet International Building Code requirements, that would obviously require a firewall, but it would International Building Code requirements would be that buildings be 5 foot from the property lines in order to construct a unit on both sides of the property line. So what we're presenting here this evening is those changes to require 5 foot setbacks this is for new ADUs, that they be 5 feet apart from the property lines, the rear and the side yard property line.
But, so that I understand you right, I understand that you said the new ADUs, if that's built, a detached ADU has to be 5 feet
Yes,
away.
which would be, I don't think we have any in the city.
But also the way, right, and then also the way I read it, it says like even a detached accessory building, like a detached garage, also needs to be 5 feet away.
That's correct. That's the way the changes have been made.
And I
Garage
have a
or
hard
shed.
time with that, because a lot of people are now that in the older part, actually from 4400 north in our city, as things wear out, we're asked to be repairing things. So just tell me how that would affect. Sometimes it is cheaper to tear something down and rebuild it for an individual rather than like a garage, rather than just repair it. And so that means that usually when something's torn down, it then needs to be built to the new place. And that doesn't work out on a lot of these lots, to then build something 5 feet away,
Right.
rebuild it. And so that's where I have some
This-
heartburn with it.
The suggestion, the recommendation we received and that was based on was from the building official.
Right.
If we could certainly consider having it apply just to ADUs.
Yeah, that's what I would be for, because it just doesn't work for bigger lots, over 10,000 square feet, but for littler lots, when someone has a garage there, they want it repaired, and in order to keep our city looking good, I want to help people repair things. And if you can't repair it because it's going to have to be moved, you're just going to see people not repairing things, and it just starts looking older and older and junkier, and makes our city look tacky. So I think for me, my opinion, just a detached garage, not an ADU, if it needs to get repaired or rebuilt, it could be back to its same location where it was.
What about shed?
Well, that's the other thing. So like, I think if you require a 5-foot setback on a rear side yard for a shed, you're opening up yourself for people just buying those lifetime sheds and putting them up on the property line anyways, not even worrying about, they're not gonna worry about what the setback, they're not gonna ask for it anyways. So I think I would like to see ADUs and accessory buildings separated.
Yeah,
I think that's a more intelligent approach to it.
yeah, me too.
Anybody can disagree with me if they want.
Just so you're aware, I've already prepared ordinance changes to that effect.
Have you?
Mark's thinking about how we think. Awesome.
So if Mark's prepared those changes,
Thank you, Mark.
Lisa, could you publish those and put a public hearing together for next meeting?
Well,
Would
let's
that,
hear
would
it.
that be appropriate?
Can you hear it when we hear it, Mark?
So
thought?
didn't we, we included it in the packet, that's on starts on page 20.
I didn't look
So
at it.
just to be clear, you would be in favor of staff sometimes taking the bull by the horn and just getting things done?
Well, that's why we paid them the big bucks, so we know that all the work's getting done, and we can just,
So,
about
so Mark, in the packet, have you separated out?
No,
accessory
the
buildings?
version that I prepared was.
Just, it changes it from 1 to 5, I've seen that.
Yeah, but the version that is here is for all, but I did prepare, and it wasn't submitted with this packet. But, so I'm just letting you know that I had thought about it, and it's ready to go. If we wanted to, we could bring it forward to at our next meeting for
yeah,
review.
that'd be good.
Do you want to
then-
review it next meeting, or do you want to put a public
No,
hearing
we'll
together
just-
for it? I'm not
It's
trying to
not a
rush a
race.
public hearing either.
It's not a race, so we
Yeah.
can just
Okay.
review it, and then we'll
And this
set a
is all
public
with,
hearing.
there will be agreement here that this is best to separate them, that we have separate requirements for ADUs versus other accessory buildings. Again, because an
Yes.
ADU is not considered an accessory building itself, it is
Right.
considered a
And then, does that
accessory
impact,
reside.
that would also impact the detached ADU ordinance that just passed?
It would be,
Would have to make
it would
some-
be a modification to that ordinance.
Right, because I know on there too, like,
We wouldn't have to, well, that ordinance refers to the setbacks for each individual zone, that the ADU
it does,
is
but
in.
remember the one section where it said, for the purpose of this paragraph or this section, this is not considered a dwelling at this time?
Right, but it's not that section, the setbacks refer to the individual zone setbacks for
Okay.
accessory buildings.
Okay, I believe you.
So, I guess it would depend on if we wanted to put as an accessory building an ADU and put separate setbacks for it under the
Well,
current code.
What I prepared, though, was to totally get rid of that and making reference to the accessory building requirements and just saying that that it would be across the board, regardless of the zone, would be 5 feet on either boundary
We'll see.
For an ADU.
for an ADU. And that, it doesn't occur in the R zones as I'm showing here tonight.
Right.
That happens in the ADU ordinance itself.
So we would amend it then that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
so everybody want to take a look at that next month?
Yep.
See how it
Sure.
goes? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that good enough direction for staff on that? Sweet. All right, that takes care of item number 3C. Item number 4 is discussion how to handle planning chair vacancies. Lisa, do you want to tell us what you discovered and what our process should be from here?
My apologies, Commissioner Bradley. So in the South Ogden City Planning Commission policies and procedures,
I read it, so.
I think we have the copy. You already?
on the first page, under Roman numeral 2, officers and duties, on the 4th line from the bottom, beginning with the capitalized word if. Did you all find that? If the chair resigns, is not reappointed, or is otherwise ineligible or unable to continue in office, as in this case, the vice chair shall become the chair. A new vice chair may be elected to serve the remaining term when necessary. The next July, an election for both offices shall be held as stated above. So that
That's pretty
states that
succinct.
We don't have a vote.
Commissioner Bradley as the vice chair would become the chair. And then if he couldn't make it one time, we could either elect a
Vice
A-
Chair Pro Tem.
thank you, that's the exact word I was thinking of. Is it, I wanted to say co-tem, and I thought, no, that's not it. Or we could elect a vice chair for that 6 months. So that's kind of the question tonight. We know that Commissioner Bradley will be acting as the chair. How do you want to handle the vice chair position? Do you want to elect another vice chair at the next meeting, or do you want to just
like one
as,
right now.
if Commissioner Bradley can't make it, elect a chair pro tem?
Gentlemen, Commissioner Pruitt says we should elect one now.
A vice chair right now.
A vice chair.
For 6 months.
We are missing one member, so it's,
So that's who it becomes? Is that-
yes.
I'm good with whatever you guys decide. So let's just get a consensus. We can do it next meeting.
My preference would be to elect one, but at the next meeting.
Okay.
Anybody opposed to that? Okay, so we put that on the agenda for us, Lisa?
I will.
Thanks.
Putting you all on notice that people who don't come,
Get nominated.
Get
I got
nominated.
nominated back when I wasn't here. All right. Okay, so we'll put that on the next, be thinking about if you'd be willing to serve or if you want to nominate somebody to serve, especially those that don't show up. Item number 5, approval of minutes. Minutes were in the packet, and we've had a chance to review them. Does anybody have any questions for staff on the minutes from last meeting? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 12th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye or yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is passed to approve the minutes. Item number 6, staff reports. Ms. Kapatnoff, do you have anything for us?
I was just gonna let you know about the ADU ordinance, but I've already done that, so I don't have anything
Very good.
else.
Mr. Vlasic, anything from you? Mr. Gailey? All right. Number 7, other business. Any other business?
Have we heard any word of the high-density development going in, kind of right at our border on Harrison, kind of right across the street from the Welcome to Ogden, where the old chicken farm was?
Old chicken farm.
We haven't received any applications.
Any other business? I would like to say thank you very much for all your support as Mr. Bradley takes over for the chair and I move on to the city council. It's been an amazing time and a great learning experience to be on this planning commission, and staff has been amazing, and all the commissioners have been very supportive, and I really appreciate that. So thank you all. Number 8, public comments. Doug, do we have any public comments online? I did not make notice that there was no public comments during the public hearing recorded, so I will open it up for public comments. Looks like Mr. Pruis is coming back up. Have at it, sir.
All right. Again, my name is Christopher Pruis, 641 41st Street. And I just want to say thank you all for the tremendous job and time that you put forth in serving our community. And I guess one note, I had some family visiting out of town, and this is more a question or maybe agenda item or just asking them how they like South Ogden, the first thing that came to mind, I thought maybe they'll mention different things in the area, was on Washington Boulevard, there's that big bright pink building, Dr. John's. And they said, that was their first thing they noticed in our city. So I thought, boy, it wasn't Birch Creek, that Mercantile, it wasn't other things, and they kind of made some crack comments thinking how it was nice. Easy to find your house, just go close to the doctor. But just, I guess, it made me think. I thought the form-based code was part of that, allowed cities to, and I know it's an evolving process, but maybe to make a say on buildings, and maybe they don't have a say on how things are painted or colored, but I thought that was quite interesting. That was the thing that jumped out. So I guess moving forward, I don't know, I'd like to see maybe, I don't know who holds people accountable to when businesses come in, who is that authoritative figure to enforce or change or make recommendations of how things can look in our city. So that was just my question, so
Blame
thank
Mark.
you.
Thanks, Chris.
I don't know if it's Mark, I don't know who it is. It's our city manager, there you go.
I could reply if you would like me
Yes,
to.
please.
Yeah.
When it's a modification and it's within the parameters of under 25% of the building, we can't really control it according to the new code. So colors and that might be in the code that would normally apply for anything brought up to the current standard, that would apply at that stage. But for anything in that particular building, I don't know if they made any physical changes to the building.
No.
We can't control according to the new code because they're within their parameters of the non-conforming use.
However, if the Gardens wanted to paint any portion that's paintable of their building purple or pink, they could have. We dictate materials, but we don't dictate colors.
And
Just
that's not
FYI.
possible to do?
Could we dictate colors
I
in the
don't think
form-based
anymore.
code?
When our attorney came and spoke to us and
Yeah.
gave us he left me with the impression that we can dictate colors. but-
We do. We not necessarily colors, but tones. It has to be earth tone, and it has to match the colors of the surrounding buildings and the general colors of the neighborhood. That's already in the code for almost all of the building types.
That's only new building or
That's only for
over
new-
25%
Right, so the
renovation.
issue here is, with this being an area in transition, and the form-based code is very, that we allow modifications within 25% of the existing footprint of the building. So if they want to add on to it and they exceed 25%, the whole building has to
Be
go
brought up to
and
code.
be brought up to code. And that's our intent with having such a low level of what you can modify on your building. For the south end of the town where we have newer buildings, we have that set at 50% because we know that those buildings have been built more recently and generally don't have those same issues. So the goal in the town center here is to have a more rapid transformation of the area. Should we set that to 10%? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what we are, but there's these triggers of what we, as a non-conforming use, what you can build or what you can do within those parameters, and that's where we have it set right now. So if you're interested, you should take a look at entitled in the form-based codes, either of them, Chapter 10 under administration. There's a section there on non-conforming uses, and it makes it clear kind of what they can do and what they can't do. But it's, as long as they stick within that 25%, they can pretty much do what they want, but they can't build, we just had an application for building a garage, and since a garage is not there now, it increases the nonconformity. They can't have a garage, so that's gonna pressure them, if they want a garage, to either build a new building or sell it and find something else, and somebody else will build a new building. So it takes a little bit of time. Meanwhile, we have pink buildings.
Pink buildings.
Well,
Now, we're in public comment, right?
Yes.
So I'll just make this comment. I'm not sure how that store is not a sexually oriented business, even though they call themselves a health food store, but.
As the business license official of the city, I spoke with the applicant, and we emailed back and forth many times, and I sent the code. And they stated that, based on our code, they are not a sexually oriented business. To be honest with you, I have not gone in to check on that.
Me either.
You ought to go in there,
Field
Lisa.
trip.
And, yeah, you go in there and just say, you know what? Now we know why you were kicked out of Roy.
Yeah, I have to go check that out. I'm just kidding. All right, and no other public comments online, Doug? Having none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye or yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.